Hello everybody, hope you're all doing fine. First of all, before we start, just click on the like and share and subscribe button and click on the notification too. And yeah, that's the main thing you have to remember. And let's get to this class. And it's about the nervous system which controls all the body and how these impulses in these nerves, especially in the eye, look at there, the optic nerve, at that point, observe the arrow. Yeah. So these optic nerves, how they generate these impulses. And this is another picture of the cell, the neuron, and the right hand side you can see a slide view when we take it in another section. And all those things are there. And as you can see in this picture, there are a lot of pathways through which the impulses travel. Free nerve endings and a lot of other things. You don't have to know now. Just know that the muscle, skin, all of those things have an ending of a nerve which starts the impulses. Here you can see that the electrical impulses travel from the nervous system to different parts, and based on that, do remember this part, the long extensions are called axon, and it's the longest filament. It carries impulses from cell to outside. So these are the things that you have to remember in today's class. Based on this, we will study what's the generation of how these impulses are created and how they travel, and a brief idea on that. So let's start. Now, first of all, a general idea. The control and coordination is done by the nerves. The entire control and coordination of our body. The nervous system manages the control through these impulses. So these impulses are what generate this control in the nervous system. So what happens is that we get an impulse, and based on that the nerves transmit these to another places, so on, and they create some reactions or responses. And in this case, let's talk about the impulses in particular. So on the outer surface of the plasma membrane of the neuron, we are taking a single neuron, and we know that it is positively charged. We will see that in later. And inside it is negatively charged. This is due to the differences in the concentration of ions. Certain ions are present inside and certain ions are present outside a neuron. And based on that, we can say it is positively charged and negatively charged. Just plus and minus charges on the opposite sides. Inside it is negative, outside it is positive. Now, what does this mean? What happens when a signal comes? When stimulated or a signal comes to that neuron, the distribution of ion in that particular part changes, and hence the inner surface become positively charged and the outer surface become negatively charged. What it means is that the inside become positive and the outside become negative when a signal is coming. Okay, normally it is positive outside and negative inside. On signal, it changes, it becomes the opposite. Now, so signal comes. This momentary change differences stimulate adjacent part, and the next part also changes, and the previous part goes back to the earlier situation. Nerve impulses are messages transmitted through neurons. So you may not completely get the idea. What happens is that the positive charge get transmitted to the next part and to the next part, and the previous parts that is being changed, it goes back to the normal. So let us look at this. So first of all, this is a normal situation of a nerve, and what happens? A signal comes. We will represent it as violet, and this arrow indicates the signal coming. So signal reaches at the beginning point of the neuron, and what happens next? It changes something. A signal stimulated inside the neuron, and what happens? The positive charge outside, we are denoted as plus red color. You are putting that inside. So inside become positive, that is red color, and the outside, which was once positive, becomes what? Negative. We'll denote that in blue. So outside become negative and inside become positive. And that's the first step. What happens next? It moves to the next part. So the previous part become as before, and the impulses move into the neuron, and it moves again into the neuron, and thus it passes on. What at these points, the charges become the opposite. See, the positive on the inside and the negative on the outside. And finally it reaches the target place. And thus the stimulus moves. And at the end of the axon, we knew a small part called the synaptic node, at the tip of the axonite. It secretes the neurotransmitter. So we know that signal transmit through this and it reaches the tip portion. You can see in the picture, it starts from the dendrite and it reaches and goes through the axon as is plus and minus we saw earlier, and reaches the axon terminal where the synaptic knob is present. At that point, it secretes neurotransmitters. That junction, the place where the knob is found, is typically called the synapse. So there's a few things. Synapse is the junction between two neurons, or a neuron and a muscular cell, or a neuron and a glandular cell, another type of cells. Where nerves reach the end to another cell, to a neuron or whatever, it is called the synapse. And this picture, we can see that this is the synaptic knob. It's quite big, isn't it? So we can see there are a lot of parts inside it. We can axon terminal, synaptic vessels. So the signal comes through the arrow. And what happens? At the end, something is released. A small bubbles are broken and small green parts is being released, right? And that is a synaptic cleft. That gap is synaptic cleft. I mean the gap between two neurons or two cells. And the signal from one cell, that is a neuron, reaches the end, the tip, that is the synaptic cleft, the synaptic knob, then to the synaptic gap, that is synaptic cleft. And finally, it reaches the next cell, right? And this is the main thing that you have to remember. And and this in this gap, the neurotransmitters is represented as green, the dust particles. So what happens? A signal. For example, if we are feeling we are eating something and a signal is generated at the tip of the tongue. So the signal goes from the tip of the tongue to the neuron, and from the neuron it starts and goes to the next neuron. And that gap between neuron to neuron or neuron to muscle, there's a small gap that is called the synaptic cleft. And the point of interaction, see, the point of interaction, as the arrow say, there's a small gap, and the point of interaction is done by the neurotransmitters, and it is released from this synaptic node. I guess that's the main point. We will just recap it once more to understand this topic. So there are a lot of things. The signal goes from a single neuron through the exchange of ions, positive and negative, and it reaches the end, and at the end we have the synaptic node and the neurotransmitters is released to the next neuron. And that's the main portion. So there are a few things. Just remember the synaptic node and the neurotransmitters that is being released as the arrow pointed. And there are few other things. What happens first? A quick review of just this part. First of all, the signal goes across the neuron as the arrow points, and it should reach the next neuron. So at the end we have this synaptic node where the signal reaches the end, and at the node there are few synaptic vesicles and a lot of other things. And what happens next? It release neurotransmitters, the green bubbles, and you can see some are also found in the bottom region. And look at here, the neurotransmitters, those small green things. See, from inside the big bubble, small green bubbles are released. That's the neurotransmitters, and from there that reaches the next cell or the neuron, and it gives a signal to the next one. See, the signal is going on. And that's the major things that you should remember on this topic. And that's how the neuron is generated and transmitted across a neuron. And this picture also seen, you can see there are different neurons over there, and this is also a different type. Okay, there are different types. We will deal with that later on. Just understand this topic. And yeah, I guess that's the major thing that you remember, and I hope you all remember all the parts and everything. And yeah, and if you have any doubts and everything, just write down, and you can comment in the comment box. And finally, click like, share and subscribe button. Thank you.